of sense.
Yeah. On the chat, Bo Weevil. Great show, guys. Go Clemson. I would love to see West Virginia in the ACC. They are a football school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they have, like, I know that, lately they've been a little mediocre, but they have a great football tradition. I mean,
I think Neil Brown's a hell of a coach. Yeah. I really like him. I think he's going to have them playing pretty well this year. They're a tough out. I think defensively they should be pretty good. They did, obviously lose a huge piece in Tyke Smith, and that's one of the major of the transfer portal. As a player of that caliber, not transferring because of really any reason other than like, I just go somewhere better, basically is what it felt like, quite honestly, him going to Georgia. But yeah, I got a lot of respect for West Virginia. They're tough in basketball. They're tough more often than not in football, etc. So them in the ACC, I mean, I know Mountaineer fans, you've been waiting for like 3 weeks to hear that news, and I'd love to know, what the ACC's actual opinion is of West Virginia. But as we've seen, they've been through this. They've had this over and over and over again, much like TCU with realignment. So I'm sure some of the fans are used to it, but at the same time, yeah, you'd love just that logical fit like 2 weeks ago for the ACC to say, oh, the Big 12's falling apart? Well, West Virginia, come on home. But, yeah, that's not been the case.
Well, yeah. And I can't – it's gone past, but, if the ACC added West Virginia as a full member, they'd have 16 and everything, and Notre Dame, like, except for foot and everything, and Notre Dame could still be independent, which they're going to stay until the rules make them do it.
Yeah, they have no reason to be anything but independent.
So they have no reason to. I mean, like the rules would have to make them do it, and the ACC. I also think that they're not going to add like. If they decide to add schools, like their first 15 phone calls are going to be to Notre Dame going, how about today? How about now?
Yeah,
no?
probably.
How about no?
Yeah, and that's good business because that's the only brand that's going to come in that's going to bring really all that much value. And I've seen West Virginia fans like break down the attendance figures and the alumni bases and how much value they would add. And I think I've seen every fan base for every school who's potentially going to be moving do that to some extent. We've seen the schools themselves do that. There was the great old Kansas graphic from a couple weeks ago about the airport, and how it's being remodeled or whatever. But, everybody's kind of done that to some extent. But it really does seem like, I mean, just geographically, it's the natural fit. But there is something preventing it, obviously. And what that is, I don't know. Is that Notre Dame and a to be determined on Notre Dame, and they're just going to keep plugging away at trying to get membership or get them as full members until doing anything else? I don't know. I'd love to hear the conversations behind the scenes, though, because there's a lot to figure out. And, look, that's a conference who doesn't have a very good contract right now. And not only do they not have a very good contract, they have a contract that's not that great that doesn't end for 10 more years. I mean, it doesn't end any – actually, I think it's closer to 15. I think it's actually closer – I think it's, 2036 maybe? Yeah. So that thing doesn't end for another 15 freaking years. So that's got to get figured out as well. Before too much else happens.
Well, it's hard to renegotiate a contract with 15 years.
Yeah,
left.
I mean, you
can do it with 2 or 3. Especially if you if the SEC wanted to renegotiate their TV contract, which they can right now because they can do it. They've got a couple years left on it before it comes up, and that's one of the reasons Oklahoma and Texas joined. But for the ACC and hey, we'd like to renegotiate, and ESPN can say we'll put you on the books for 2034. Mm-hmm. January 1st, 2034. We'll have January 2nd. January 1st is the holiday. So January 2nd, we'll have a conference call. You make sure all your people are ready. I mean, because that's how it's going to be. And so, yeah, it's so strange that the ACC of all these conferences has this massive TV deal. But, look, they just launched the ACC network 2 years ago, 2019. Yeah. So their thought at the time was, well, this will get us through, 20 years, and then...
Well, I mean, look, it may not be a great deal, but it is a deal that keeps them secure for 15 years. I mean, they're at least attached to ESPN. The concern for the Big 12 is that their deal runs out soon. The concern for other conferences is their deals come up soon. So at least for the ACC, a saving grace, and maybe why we haven't seen them go crazy as far as realignment goes is because, look, again, they got 15 years left on their TV deal. They don't really... have to do anything. They're locked in, but I also know they don't want to get left behind, and they don't want to run into a situation where all of a sudden Clemson and Florida State are like, hey, why are we carrying all the pails of water around here and everybody else is just drinking from our buckets that we're bringing, and then that's what the Big 12 turned into, and that's what you got to be careful of if you're the ACC, I would think, is just if the payouts get so uneven, or you know, Clemson starts to look and they see like, wow, the Bamas and the Georgias and all them, like they were already ahead of us to an extent, but now they're starting to become a speck in the foreground. Like they're getting then that's when I think you'd see some concern and maybe a little grumbling. But yeah, right now they're locked in, and the biggest wild card of all, we don't know what the SEC's future plans are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one that caused this whole thing, and that's the one that would likely cause the next wave as well, if they intend to do anything else other than what they've already done.
Well, and look, Bob Bowlesby mentioned in the court filing, in the Senate hearing a couple weeks ago that, you know, Texas, you know, the schools in Texas represent the 25 million people of their 35 million people footprint, maybe 33 million. So 35 million person footprint, 27 million are here in Texas, 8 million are in the rest of the Big 12. So they're not populous states. All the other conferences have this same problem in that, you know, they have two or three schools that are in massive population centers, and the rest are smaller because that's what America is.
Right.
You know, so again, all of them do.
We only care about what the big cities have to say.
Yeah, but I mean, like, again, if the ACC lost Florida State, Miami, and Clemson, and Miami kind of maybe just a tag along because they're not a big school, but they're in a massive population center, then most of the people who watch the ACC are in Florida. You know, one of the only ACC schools that makes money is Florida State. You know, or at least that draws eyeballs and gets ratings is Florida State. Florida State and Clemson get eyeballs, and Clemson just recently. For a long time, you could put Clemson on TV and anything, and at halftime they could have elected the president, and people still wouldn't have watched it. I mean, like, that's just how it was, you know, that because they were not a national brand. They are now, but it takes time to build that. Michael from Clarksburg, West Virginia, you're on Singham 365 Radio on the Bet US caller line. Thanks for your call.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for taking my call. Enjoying your guys' show. I just recently started picking it up in the last week and a half to 2 weeks, and got to tell you, it's pretty impressive. You guys do a really nice job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
A couple things. First off, this Notre Dame stuff. Here's what's bad. The Notre Dame prostituted the Big East years ago by allowing them to play all their non-football games in the Big East. And the ACC has allowed them to do it again. And they've got this grant of rights until, 35? Mm-hmm. There's no way that Notre Dame's going to commit to the ACC with that current contract because they've got them by the kahunas where they don't have to. If they would have been able to force them to say, either you play all your sports in our league or none, and everybody else did the same thing, then Notre Dame would have had to join the conference. By you letting them exploit you, that just lets them stay independent. The second thing is that you take a look at West Virginia, and sure, I'm a homer for West Virginia, just like you guys are with Baylor. And I'm impressed by your basketball program. You look at the TV ratings from ESPN. The year that Geno Smith, we played you guys, the score was both in the 70s in that game. It's one of the highest rated games ever recorded on ESPN. And West Virginia's numbers, even though it's a small state, they've always drawled with Tavon Austin and all those guys, Rich Rod when he was there. They've always drawled the big numbers when it comes to viewers. And you guys hit it right on the nail. We don't want to go to the West Coast. Hell, to be honest with you, we really didn't want to play in the Big 12. But like you said, you got to go where somebody wants you. The ACC snubbed us, and they claimed education. But let's face it, Dean Smith and those guys, they didn't want to come into the Coliseum with our rowdy fans, and especially in the football stadium, because we can compete. Look at the last time we played Clemson. We hung up 70 on them. Now, is it the same Clemson as it is today? Hell no. I mean, Clemson's up there with Alabama. We know that. But I think we're on the right track with Neil Brown. We're having one of the best recruiting classes in football this year, maybe in the history of the school. And if you look at viewers, we're going to compete in football and basketball. We're good in both sports. And, what do you guys think about the situation?
Look, I think you kind of nailed it. Like West Virginia's only problem is that, people have a preconceived notion about what their state is or what their university is and the value there. But I mean, look, they're competitive in damn near everything, and I can't think of the last time that they were genuinely bad for a long stretch. They might have been bad for a minute. So again, they bring value in any conference, and I kind of maybe agree with them about the ACC is that they already, had Virginia Tech and Virginia, and they just felt like, and then they brought in Pittsburgh, but I don't know why they just didn't. It was a good fit for them.
Yeah, I mean, they've just kind of been in the it's almost like they've been stuck in a washing machine, just like tumbling around, like can't quite get to a full stop somewhere, always kind of searching for that spot that makes sense. And as you said, yeah, like the Big 12 wasn't the ideal spot either. And you nailed that. I mean, they've always been kind of the outlier, right? As far as geography goes. I mean, Iowa State's kind of a little bit but I mean, like Oklahoma State, Kansas. I mean, they're all sort of that same vicinity. So West Virginia really is like the odd man out already. And now let's add another half of the country to that, and you'll really be the odd man out. So, yeah, I don't think West Virginia fans have any interest in that. But, again, like he said, and we said, if that's the option, that's the one you have to go with. I think, to me as just a college football fan, I think West Virginia is attractive. But these conference commissioners look at things in different ways. They're not looking at it as a passionate fan base or, the Geno Smith or, Tavon Austin or all the great teams. And I remember even going all the way back to Noel Devine, like back in the early 2000s when West Virginia really got on the radar, the Oklahoma Bowl game, and all that stuff. But I have an immense amount of respect for West Virginia, but there's clearly something there to where they have bounced around so much, and there has been so many conferences that it's been like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but no thank you. So what that is, I don't know, because it has to be something. Because they have a good-sized school. They do bring in, as you mentioned, like TV ratings on a fairly regular basis. We know they're amongst the most passionate fan bases, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of passionate fan bases out there. They're competitive in at least something every single year, if not pretty competitive in a lot of things any given year. So, yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that's preventing, the ACC in the past or even now from wanting to welcome them in. I guess it must just go back to how much – like, you can have value, but do you add value to what you're joining? And I think that's where fans and media, we probably get ahead of ourselves a little bit, is that, like, yeah, you may have success and you may have TV ratings and you may have championships and you may have all these things like Baylor does or West Virginia or whatever. But if you go and you join the ACC, are you really bringing something to the table? Or are you just watering it down? Now, you may say, well, there's no way we're watering it down because we've got a good football team, we've got a good basketball team. But that's not what we're talking about. Are the payouts less because you joined? If the payouts are less because you joined, then they probably don't want you because the goal's not to make less money. Now, I've seen people put formulas out there of where I think I've maybe even seen a West Virginia example of like where they would potentially add value. But I think that's what it ultimately comes down to.
I mean, they want to do what the SEC is doing right now.
Is it worth bringing in another school if everybody only makes $1 million more every year? Like, is it worth all that trouble to do it that way? I don't know. But I guarantee you this. If West Virginia could come into any conference and you could add $15 million to everybody's yearly buyout, they would be in a new dadgum conference right now.
Yeah.
And any other school, if there's any other school in the Big 12 that could immediately do that, they'd already have announced the new conference that they're in right now.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, like, it's all about value. And while you may have value as a brand, you have to add additional value. And I'm not sure that really any of these schools of the 8 do that for any of these other brands out there, quite honestly. I mean, that's why Oklahoma and Texas could make the move they made, because they add value, and they add a lot of value to the SEC, and that's why the SEC would not go out and grab a Baylor or a West Virginia. If they're going to go out and grab anybody else, they're grabbing, guess what, schools that can add value. So they're going to add USC, or they're going to add Oregon, or they're going to add, whoever else. So circling back, I maintain that I think West Virginia's best bet at the ACC is if Notre Dame capitulates. But based on everything I've read, including an article from about 10 days ago on ESPN that was really thorough on Notre Dame and the ACC, it listed all the reasons why it makes absolutely no sense for them to be anything but independent and why they would never want to be anything but independent because, as you pointed out, the ACC basically just said, hey, do whatever you want to do, use us, and then hopefully one day you'll actually love us. But Notre Dame's just like, No, we're going to keep it casual. We like the way it is now. We don't want to like fully commit. And that's basically what they've done. They're getting their cake and they're eating it too. And the ACC is like begging, like, let's make this official. And they don't want to do that because it's not in their best interest.
You can't be a major independent in basketball and volleyball. So they needed somebody
They
to be
needed
with.
somebody,
Yeah,
yep.
they needed somebody, and the ACC was all willing. But you can be in football. All right, let's go.
Shout out to the ears, though. Neil Brown, I think he's going to do a really good job there.
Yeah. Mike, a Kansas State fan from Fort Collins. You're on the Bet US call.